So, hello everyone. A quick Google Hangout here. This is Rob from Seahawks Draft Blog. Hope you're well. Glad to be doing this again, and very happy to talk about a Seahawks season and the draft as well. I'm going to come on to some draft thoughts that I want to get into in a little while. But first, a quick thought on the Seahawks, where they're at the moment. 6-5 going into a game against San Francisco this weekend. What an electrifying win last weekend as well against Carolina. What a difference a year makes as well for me. I mean, I don't know about you, but at times during the 2017 season, it felt like a chore to watch this team for a lot of reasons. It felt like the NFL was wide open. Without an obvious great team in either the NFC or the AFC. There are a lot of good teams, but no really outstanding great team, the way that we saw with the Seahawks and the Broncos in 2013, for example, and even the Seahawks eventually in 2014 as well. I don't think there was a really great team in the 2017 season. There was nobody that kind of really stood out. And I think that was proven with the way that the Eagles ended up winning the whole thing with Nick Foles at quarterback in the end in the playoffs. So there was this huge opportunity there for Seattle if they could have just stayed on track. They'd gone all in on the Sheldon Richardson trade because they were going all in on the season. I mean, they traded for Dwayne Brown as well during the year. I mean, they were really, I think they sensed that was the opportunity. They realized that it was a wide open year, that a team was going to win the Super Bowl that wasn't a really sort of outstanding potential dynasty or anything. It was just going to be whoever really caught fire in the playoffs. Which is what the Eagles ultimately did with Nick Foles. And I think that's why they were so aggressive. Sheldon Richardson came in, as I mentioned. Dwayne Brown came in. And it showed that the Seahawks were really... It felt like there was a finality to what was coming after that because they were so aggressive that year. There had been talk in the offseason about possibly trading Richard Sherman ahead of that season. So it felt like it was now or never with this group. One last blast with a number of key veteran starters, your Shermans, your Chancellors, your Bennetts, and people like that. And when the season began, the wheels fell off pretty quickly. The offensive line was atrocious. They couldn't run the ball at all. It was the worst running game in the NFL by far. The defense wasn't living up to expectations. They lost Cliff Averill very early in the year to a career-ending injury in the end. Sherman and Chancellor then were out for the rest of the season soon after that Arizona game. There were other key injuries as well. They lost George Fant. It was going to be the starting left tackle in pre-season, of course. So the wheels fell off there. And a year that promised so much ended up being emphatically disappointing. I mean, they never felt like a proper contender at all. The only two wins that I found personally really enjoyable, I think, were the Rams game on the road and the Texans game at home. But it felt like we were watching the end of an era, and we were, it turns out. And the year ended with the crushing embarrassment of the hammering by the Rams at home, only to then regain some mild hope with the victory in Dallas on Christmas Eve the week later. And then just as you start to think, hey, maybe they're going to sneak into the playoffs here with 10 wins, they go and have another agonizing defeat in week 17 to the Cardinals with a Blair Walsh missed field goal at the end. So it was that kind of year. It was a punishment for the Seahawks fans, really. It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun to hear the negativity. It wasn't enjoyable sort of considering the Mike Silver piece about all the big names that were going to leave, and that proved to be correct. Jay Glazer speculated about Pete Carroll retiring. He denied that straight away, but it was out there. You know, this wasn't supposed to be the way that it ended for a lot of these players and the way that it ended for that particular era of Seahawks football. So we move on a year now. And even with the team sitting here now with a bang average 6-5 record, they're not looking like, for me, I don't think they look like a serious Super Bowl contender. They look like a team that is in a kind of a reset, but is doing well. I don't think you look at them the same way that you look at the Rams, Chiefs, Saints, Patriots, Steelers, for example. Not yet anyway. It just feels more fun, though, doesn't it? I mean, the team has got new energy. It's got a new identity. There are new names that are emerging. Fluker, Reed, Clark, McDougal, Carson, others as well. It's fun to see the likes of Jermaine Ifedi take a positive step forward, which he's done. It's good to see Trey Flowers proving yet again that Seattle's got the best defensive backs coach in the entire league as its head coach. To see the return of a bully with an identity based around the offensive line and the running game and the toughness of the five guys in front plus George Fant just hammering most of the opponents week in, week out, and just looking good doing it, and it fits and it works. And it feels like they're moving forward. And you know what? They may still finish 9-7. Fingers crossed that they're going to win out or at least get to 10 wins, but they may still finish 9-7 and not really make a dent in the postseason at all. But it feels like they are still on the right track, whatever happens. And that with another off season, it's going to help. That a new core is emerging. I think the last 2 wins were extremely enjoyable. They weren't perfect performances by any stretch, but guess what? They rarely are on the road. And Carolina, going into that game last weekend, had won 10 games in a row at home before Sunday. That's over a season unbeaten at home for the Panthers. And Seattle were the ones that ended that run. And they did what Carolina and New England and Green Bay couldn't do earlier in the season. That's winning Detroit too. So those are 2 really good wins. You've got the Green Bay win. Hammering the Raiders in London was pretty fun. There's been a bit of enjoyment to this season for me. And when you look at the team and the way it's set up, I think the offense looked pretty set and ready, and it's still got room to grow even further. But to me, it's looking really sharp, and they can win in multiple ways, as they showed at the weekend. The defense clearly needs some work, though, and it needs some help up front specifically. Plus, it needs some depth and competition in the secondary. They need to work out what they're going to do at the will position at linebacker. Are they going to re-sign KJ Wright? Are they going to re-sign Michael Kendricks? They're going to go in a new direction. But that's what the off-season focus can be. And I like it when there's clarity on what you need to do. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Seattle has had in different drafts between 2013 and 2016, because they were just so stacked. I mean, the roster was loaded. And it was hard to find a clear direction of what do we really need to improve here. Yeah, I guess you could say in 2016 it was O-line. It was trying to get the running game back again and trying to get that moving. But from sort of 2013 and then when they won the Super Bowl afterwards, they were kind of just adding players that were fun players or had a certain athletic profile or exciting. Some of them worked out, some of them really haven't. And maybe it was just because there wasn't that clear direction of we need this, therefore we're going to go out and get this, because there weren't many needs on the roster. And it was hard for the guys who were being drafted to actually get in there in the first place. So I think that now that there is this clear direction, there was last year, improve the running game, and then this year, improve the defense, that could help them in the draft. Certainly, I think there's a decent chance that's going to be the case. And when you reflect on the defense, and we're going to talk about defensive prospects in the draft in a couple of moments, I thought this was a really interesting tweet from Hawk Blogger earlier today for some context on the defense and the way it's performed recently. Because I think I would certainly say this without digging into the stats, and I think everybody else would see this just from the eye test, is the defense doesn't look like it's played very well against the Chargers, the Rams, the Packers, and the Panthers. And yet, this is what Hawk Blogger had written down. This is what Brian had got here. This is the tweet. Seahawks opponents in the last 4 games average their average points per game and what they scored against Seattle. So the Chargers are averaging on offense 27.9, about 28 points a game. They scored 25 against the Seahawks. The Rams are averaging 35.4 points a game. They scored 36. Green Bay averaging 24 points, scored 24 against the Seahawks. Panthers are averaging 26.1. Scored 27. And Brian says the Seahawks D has essentially been a league average defense, which is about what they are. And he's absolutely spot on. It's a fantastic tweet, which really highlights where this defense is. It's just not the Legion of Boom. It's just not a league leading defense. They can play some of the most high powered offenses, some of the best quarterbacks in the league, and give up an average amount of points based on what they've done all year. That's it. They're not going to shut down Aaron Rodgers. They're not going to shut down Rivers and the offense in LA with the Rams. They're going to give up some plays to Cam and to Christian McCaffrey. But ultimately, they are doing about as well as everybody else does against these offenses. So I think that's encouraging. It's not as if this is a terrible situation and they need to completely rebuild the defense. They just need some pieces. They just need some help. That's all it's going to take. So I think that's interesting. I think that's a really interesting tweet from Brian there. The defense has performed on a par, and it hasn't been a disaster. It's just not the Pete Carroll defenses that we've necessarily come to expect, that they give up too many explosive plays. They give up too many easy runs. And that, for me, is what's going to be the focus in the offseason, surely, is going to be to reduce the number of explosive plays in the pass and the run game and just be better on defense, to take that next step on defense, considering they're not going to have Earl Thomas, they're not going to have one or two others that maybe move on. Just to find a couple of extra pieces. And I think this is the perfect draft to address that. And I cannot express enough how great the first round of the draft is going to be for defensive linemen. I mean, it is just going to be incredible. And sometimes you hear this, you hear people talk about drafts and you go, this is a great draft for running backs. This is a great draft for receivers. And it's never really the case. this is the case. This defensive line draft in the first round is going to be even better than the cornerback one was a couple of years ago. It's going to be better than the running back one was. And for me, it's on a similar level to probably the receiver situation in 2014, where you just saw a cluster of these guys go in the first round, in the first sort of 40 picks. I think it's going to be even better than that. You can have so many names that are going to go in the first round and the legitimate first round picks as well. So there are fantastic options here. But if you go, I've seen a lot of people message me and ask comments on the blog, or will send me tweets, and they will say, they'll relay comments from other sites. So CBS, Twitter, some other draft site, for example, and I'll get asked about the receiver class or the tight end class or whatever. And, I would just ignore that. I hate to be that blunt, but if people are out there are saying, hey, this is a great receiver class, as the first thing that they take away from this draft, or are the tight ends interesting, or anything like that, I wouldn't be able to take that seriously, because this draft is going to start and end with the fantastic array of talent on the defensive line. I think anybody who sort of deviates from that is just overthinking things. They're trying to think too hard outside the box. They're trying to maybe a bit contrarian or whatever. This is all about defensive line. This is what the first round of this draft is going to be. And, I get it sometimes. I think people who write and talk about the draft, they want to be first. They want to be the first one to bring up a prospect, or they want to be the first one to talk about a particular position group. And they think that if that comes off and they're going to get kudos, they're going to get respect, people are going to end up praising them. It's a little bit sad, really, but it's just about an ego thing. But I think the most important thing is just to be accurate and to tell you exactly what is available in this class, and not try to overthink things and not try to overanalyze certain prospects that we've known about for a long time. And it's quite clear that this is a draft for defensive linemen. So I'm going to come on to those guys in a minute. I want to give you a few thoughts on some of the other positions in the 2019 class before we talk about the D linemen. So receivers, people ask about receivers. There is some depth, I think, and there's going to be some depth in the middle rounds. There are some intriguing guys that you may be able to develop, but really there's a distinct lack of first-round talent. There's nobody, in my opinion, to get really excited about. I mean, I like the Ohio State pair, Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin. Ohio State have got a good collection of receivers that could have a career at the next level. I'm increasingly interested in Marquise Hollywood Brown, the cousin of Antonio Brown. He's very small. He's incredibly quick. I think you can kind of imagine him on this offense, which I think sort of really does utilize fast, smaller receivers who are sudden, can get open and create separation. They use them very, very well, as we've seen with Tyler Lockett. Will be interesting to see him on Seattle's offense. Maybe a bit of a luxury in terms of early rounds, but he's someone that I find very interesting. And there are others that I like too, but overall, I'm really not crazy about this receiver class, and think people are overrating certain players. People like Harmon at NC State, Keel Harry at Arizona State, Arcega Whiteside at Stanford. I think they're overrated players. AJ Brown at Ole Miss might be the first receiver off the board. Could certainly see that, but I just find him quite an unexciting player. And, I'll have a sportsman bet with the rest of you, if you like, that he doesn't do much at the combine in terms of working out, because I don't think he's a great tester, and I think he might shirk a little bit of that and try and protect his stock a little bit. That's a distinct possibility with AJ Brown, I think. And then you've got DK Metcalf. A lot of people like him. Great athlete, very big upside. But he's had a Mike Williams type neck injury, the receiver at Clemson, kept him out for a whole year. And I'm just not sure he's going to play much in 2019. So I think he might be hoping or thinking with his approach, get a team in the NFL, get working with proper support to recover, get the wheels in motion of a pro career rather than wasting a year if you're not going to play at Ole Miss, and just sort of progress things and move them along. He took out a huge insurance policy, according to Tony Pauline. So he's kind of got that security with him. I think he just wants to get into the league and sort of just get the wheels in motion for that. You've got to think about it. Is he ever going to play again? If he is, where's he going to be at? Look how long it's taken Mike Williams to get back to his best. So I'm not sure. I see people mocking him in the first round, and I just can't see it. And I think overall, the 2020 receiver class is going to be a lot better than this one. Offensive linemen, especially offensive tackle, they often go early. Very limited options here. I think David Edwards at Wisconsin could go early. I think Greg Little, again at Ole Miss, look like they could be relatively early picks, maybe mid-first round, late first round. Little might have to move inside to guard. I am not a fan of Alabama's Jonah Williams in the first round at all. I think he's especially overrated, especially if anybody thinks he's going to play tackle. For me, he's a clear guard prospect. Doesn't have any of the attributes that I would look for a left tackle. I think he's going to have to kick inside. Wouldn't be crazy about him in round 1 at all. It's not a good year for offensive tackles. If you're looking in that direction, you're probably going to be left looking for alternatives in free agency. Cornerbacks, I think there's a lot of overrated cornerbacks like the receivers, but the need and the premium on the position could lead some to maybe overdraft a little bit here. Combine's going to be big at this. I think Greedy Williams at LSU is raw as anything. I'm not sold on him as a top 15 pick. He gets projected there. I think he might end up going in that range. I'm just not sure that he's as good as people think. And, you know, people tend to overrate cornerbacks. You remember Jalen Tabor, Tease Tabor, and everyone thought he was going to be a first round, went in the middle rounds. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Greedy Williams, but, you know, big names get propelled very early into the draft and then sometimes don't live up to the hype. I think Washington's Byron Murphy is a better prospect than Greedy Williams. I'm intrigued by him at safety as well as cornerback. I don't know why, but he just looks made for free safety. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a safety converted to nickel corner with Florida in 2018. He's declared for the draft now. It's going to be interesting to see where teams view his stock. Quarterbacks, I'd pass. If you are desperate for a quarterback this year, good luck finding one. It's not the year to be doing that. And then safeties. I'm just not seeing it with the safeties. Alabama's Deontay Thompson gets a really good press, but he's just not a great athlete. And he lacks that huge size of a strong safety, but the speed, he hasn't got the speed of a free safety either. He's not a bad player. He's far from a bad player. But he's probably like a 4.6 runner. I mean, 4.57, 4.6, I would project at that in a really lean frame without major production in college, despite the fact that he's playing behind the Alabama defensive line. He is not Grant Delpit at LSU. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick year in 2020. He's not a rangy free safety. And however many people are out there telling you that, he just isn't a range. He's just not he's not that Earl Thomas type free safety. He really isn't. He looks like the type of player because of his frame. If you just look at him when he's not got the pads on, it's really lean and long, got long arms. I reckon the Seahawks, if they looked at him, would probably try and convert him to cornerback with the way that they've done with Trey Flowers because he's got that frame. And I think they would look at him as like, hey, he could be a day 3 cornerback prospect for the Seahawks. But I don't think he's going to be an option for them in the early rounds as a safety. Not at all. I personally don't think he's a round 1 talent. Some people say he's going to go in that range. I don't see it. I'm not a fan of that. I think Taylor Rapp could sneak into round 1, but he might be the only first round safety. So moving on to the defensive line class, I think one thing I like to do is to pay attention to how players are perceived during high school recruiting, because teams aren't just watching these players as underclassmen or seniors and making judgments. On the top players, the scouts and GMs have had them on the radar for a long time, you know, the 5-star recruits, people like that. So I know the guys at Rivals who cover high school recruiting, when they were sort of going through the class of players that are going to develop into the NFL draft next year, they viewed Rashawn Gary, the Michigan lineman, and Dexter Lawrence at Clemson as the 2 best interior defenders they'd seen in the same class. So they'd never seen 2 guys as good at that in the same class ever. You know, they were completely wowed by the pair. That's Gary at Michigan and Lawrence at Clemson. And we're talking about 2 big-time 5-star recruits. Number 1, number 2 in the country. And you could argue in the case of Gary, he's never quite lived up to the billing at Michigan. I'll debate with anybody who says the same about Lawrence, though, because I think he's just been fantastic for Clemson. But I suspect the NFL is going to look at the 2 of them and think, incredible athletes, great size, limitless potential, have been on our radar for a long time, no character flags, great talents. And I think they're going to go a lot earlier than some of the mocks that you're seeing projecting them in kind of the mid to late first. Do not be surprised if Rashawn Gary and Dexter Lawrence go in the top 10. I think Gary's a lock to go in the top 10, as long as he avoids any kind of injuries or any other issues between now and the draft. And I think Dexter Lawrence is going to go a lot earlier than people are thinking. He is special. He's a really fantastic player. Nose tackle, athleticism, ability to pass rush. He has got the size to play the nose and control the line and play the run very well and to get and do everything that you want. He can get into the backfield and make plays. He'll make tackles for a loss. He'll sack the quarterback. I mean, I don't think I've seen a player like Dexter Lawrence before. You see these big nose tackles. You don't see them with the mobility that Lawrence has got on the control and the savvy. So I think he and Gary are going to go very, very early. And then I'd say the same about Christian Wilkins. I do not understand what people are seeing with Christian Wilkins. I keep seeing so many people saying he's not in the first round or he's a late What a load of nonsense. He is an outstanding talent. Wilkins has got amazing speed for his size, quickness. He's a rare athlete. He's just got great proportion in his frame. He's got an incredibly powerful lower body. He's squatty and quick, and it's hard to get under because of that squatty frame. It's really difficult to sort of get into him and use your length as an offensive lineman to try and control his block. He's like really slippery and gets away from you. He's the one who's doing the most of the controlling in there. He reminds me a lot of Sheldon Richardson when he was at Missouri, but I think he's even better than Sheldon. And just looking at the way that Clemson use him, even on offense in the red zone. I mean, he scored on a toss play as a running back last week. He's got a few touchdowns as a running back this year, and I just love him. He's the real deal, a proper 3 technique. I think teams are going to fall in love with him during his interviews at the Combine. I watched a video recently with the 4 great Clemson offensive linemen. It was an ESPN interview. It's on YouTube. You can dig it out. Cleveland Ferrell, Dexter Lawrence, Christian Wilkins, and Austin Bryant. And Wilkins just took over the room. He's the leader of that group. His understanding of technique and scheme is highly impressive. It usually is for the Clemson guys, offense and defense. It was special with him. He knows what he's doing. And if you see a mock draft where Christian Wilkins isn't in the top 15, just click off it. Seriously, just get rid of that thing. Click off it straight away. Christian Wilkins is going in the top 15. And if you see anybody projecting him, well, just click off that straight away. And I'm not being funny, but there are some appalling mock drafts out there at the moment. I read one, and I'm not going to name names, but it was a national, very popular sports broadcaster with a reputation for extensive draft coverage on their website. They had Christian Wilkins. They didn't have him in the first round. I mean, that's just a ridiculous projection. They had DK Metcalf with his bad neck injury at number 2 overall. Might not play in 2019. They had Yodny Kajust, the West Virginia tackle. He's not even the best tackle on West Virginia's team. And Jonah Williams in the top 15. They had Mac Wilson, the Alabama linebacker, and Kelvin Harmon, who's the NC State receiver, in the top 20. Chris Lindstrom, the guard at Boston College, was at number 20. He had to wait till pick number 23 for Cleveland Ferrell to go off the board. And Devin White, the brilliant LSU linebacker, was at 24. And Christian Wilkins not in round 1. I mean, this is just, I cannot fathom a projection that has that laid out there. And I just ignore stuff like that. If you don't see Christian Wilkins in a top 15 mock, ignore it. I think Albert Breer did one today. He's pretty well sourced. He did one, in the last couple of days, and he had Christian Wilkins in the top 10. I mean, that's the range that he's going to go. So if you see a mock draft with him in the 20s, the 30s, or not in the first round, just park it and move on. There are a lot of players. I mean, Nick Bosa, Cleveland Ferrell, Ed Oliver, Rashawn Gary, Quinnen Williams, Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, Raekwon Davis. They are going to go very, very early. I think that Ja'Shea Polite from Florida may do too, and I think Auburn's Derek Brown's going to go early. That's the cream of this amazing D-line class. I can't imagine any of those guys going to be available to the Seahawks. So here's the list again. You've got Nick Bosa, Cleveland Ferrell, Nick Bosa at Ohio State, Cleveland Ferrell at Clemson, Ed Oliver at Houston, Rashawn Gary at Michigan, Quinnen Williams at Alabama, Christian Wilkins at Clemson, Dexter Lawrence at Clemson, and Raekwon Davis at Alabama. Possibly Ja'Shea Polite, possibly Derek Brown too. 10 guys, the cream of the defensive line class, the best of the best in a great D-line class. I don't think any of those guys, because the Seahawks look as if they're going to be picking possibly 20s or 30s if they get to the playoffs. Let's hope so. If worst case scenario, similar range to last year, I don't think those guys will be there. If the Seahawks pick 15th, maybe they get a chance. If they're picking 18, 19, 20, no. If they get to the playoffs, they're not going to be there. Who could be available there, though? Let's have a look at some of the names. You've got Brian Burns having a fantastic year for Florida State. Incredibly long and lean, great quickness, great athlete, looks that way. Having a great year on a bad Florida State team. But he's incredibly light. I read something a couple of weeks ago that said he could be 220 pounds. You cannot play as a pass rusher at 220 pounds in the NFL. And there will have to be concerns about, can he gain more weight? How is it going to affect his athleticism and his quickness? I think the weigh-in and the testing is going to be so important to Brian Burns, and it's making me pull. I thought he could have the potential to go top 10 because I was presuming he'd be heavier than that. Now that I've got the number 220 in my mind and I'm looking at him and I'm seeing skinny legs, really skinny frame, I'm thinking, yeah, he does look 220 pounds. Starting maybe to think he's going to go a little bit later than I initially thought. So that's something to bear in mind. Good player, weight could be an issue there. Zach Allen's the next on the list. Having a brilliant season. Brilliant season for Boston College. One of the most fun players to watch. Having a great year. Big, can play inside out. Get off is much better than people are having you believe. Got great get off. Can win, bend the arc, straight and get to the quarterback. Can win with power. Can move inside and rush. Like everything about Zach Allen. I think the athletic testing, though, needs to be strong because you just look at his frame. He's not like some of these other guys. He doesn't look like Jashea Polite rushing the edge. He doesn't look like Cleveland Farrell. He looks like an interior defensive lineman who's kicked outside. So if he's going to play end, and if people are going to view him that way, he needs to have a strong combine. It's going to be big for him. It's going to be huge for him. Draymond Jones, Ohio State, great interior pass rusher. I'm not convinced on his run defense at all. He might be a specialist only in terms of he comes in for obvious passing downs, rush the passer, comes off again. I don't think you can trust him at the moment with his run defense. Teams are going to have to work out whether or not they can work on that and improve that for him to be an every down defender. Not saying he can't do it, just that you see a lot of players like this come into the league. Great interior pass rush, decent athletes, kind of big, but they just haven't got the dog in them, to play the run downs and to just sort of control their gaps. Too often he's run out of his gaps. He was handled at the line. I think it was against Maryland recently, and they had a huge running day. Like they're running back about 250 odd yards in the first 3 quarters. That's going to be an issue for him. So something to consider. Good pass rusher, but I worry about the run defense with Draymond Jones. You've got Gerald Willis, the second. It's got a weird past that teams are going to have to dig into. He was at Florida, then he went to Miami, then I think he had a year off in Miami. Now he's back. He is having a big season, huge numbers in terms of tackles for a loss. He's got like 17 for the year. He tested incredibly well at the Spark Combine before he went to Florida initially. So Gerald Willis, his agility testing was through the roof. I mean, his agility testing, if compared to the rest of the defensive linemen in the last class, was right up there with the top players. Talking like Marcus Davenport level. Rasheem Green, who had a great test. Willis is right up there, and that will interest a lot of teams if he repeats that at the NFL Combine. He's definitely one to keep an eye on if Seattle trades down. For me, I think Gerald Willis is probably late. I'd say early second, not late first. Early second to mid second, if you can buy into his character and think that he's okay and have no concerns there. I don't think he's an every down player. He's about 280 pounds. He might be more of an inside out. Might be more of a specialist. If you get him later on, that's fine. But there's definitely something to like there. And he does play with aggression. So I think he's a player to keep an eye on. You've got Jerry Tillery at Notre Dame who could be available. Huge player. Huge size. Looks like a Greek god. Former left tackle prospect. When he was coming through high school recruiting, they were testing him as a left tackle prospect. If you go on the Rivals website and they've got the old clips of him there, he's taking on the defensive lineman as a left tackle. That's why he was getting projected at. He's built a lot like Raekwon Davis, maybe a little bit leaner than Raekwon Davis at Alabama, but he's that similar size. He's not as nasty, though. He's described often as a gentle giant, and he's a bit of an intellectual, and he's a little bit different to some of the players that you listen to in interviews. He plays tough, but you kind of want Seattle, at least I do, to build on this newfound bullying identity and draft guys with an edge. And I just wonder, has Tillery got that edge? That's something that we're probably never going to find out. The only way you're going to find that out is by sitting in a room with him at the combine or whatever, asking his coaches, asking his teammates about him. I don't think we're ever going to have that knowledge. So I'm not going to say that I don't want to draft him or that I do want to draft him because of this. I just want to fit. I want a beast in the middle. If they're going to draft someone who's going to play inside, I want someone who's going to be an absolute monster in there. And Raekwon Davis is a monster. I'm not convinced that Jerry Tillery is, but he is a great athlete. He's having a fantastic year. If he tests really well, he's only going to bump his stock up. I think he's probably a late first-round pick. And I like Tillery. And watching him against USC, had a decent game there. I watched what was the game that I was watching? I can't remember there was another game that I watched just yesterday where he was really impressive. I can't remember who the opponent was, though. For Notre Dame, but he was really impressive in that game. So he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. He'll be in the range where Seahawks may end up drafting. There's DeAndre Walker, who's a personal favorite. He's explosive. He's at Georgia. Tough, edgy, good pass rusher, and he lines up at the line of scrimmage, plays the run very well, seals the edge a lot better than Josh Allen at Kentucky, for example. He can drop into space. Love what he's, love everything about him. Great intensity, kind of fits the personality that I think you're looking for in a pick. You've got Jalen Ferguson at LA Tech, we talked about a couple of days ago on the blog. Big production, amongst the leaders for sacks and tackles for loss in the country. Some raw technique issues. Looks like he needs some time to develop, but can he impress at the Senior Bowl and the Combine and really move his stock up like Vernon Butler did? Another former LA Tech guy went in the first round to Carolina a couple of years ago. You've got Austin Bryant, pure edge rusher, somehow has become underrated again. Gets after it, plays hard. Don't think he's ever going to be an amazing, great player, but could be a very useful pass rusher. You've got Christian Miller, more of a complete player these days at Alabama. Plays the run well, extremely athletic, big spark performance in high school, could play linebacker or defensive end, but I like the way that he plays the run enough to play him at end. Just not sure that he's an every down end. And then you've got Allen, who I mentioned a moment ago with Kentucky, who's having a great year. I wonder if he's more of a 3-4 offensive linebacker, outside linebacker. I think that Georgia sort of targeted him in the run game and had a lot of success in their win against Kentucky not so long ago. Concerns me a little bit in terms of his fit in a 4-3 team, even if it's a 4-3 under. So I'd be wary there. Might fit other teams who play pure 3-4, kind of like Pittsburgh, for example. Could see him as a fit there. He's probably going to go too early for Pittsburgh, but he's another player that they could look at. So we've got some options there. There's some really good options. Just to run through those names again, players that could be there for the Seahawks who play defensive line: Brian Burns, Zach Allen, Draymond Jones, Gerald Willis, Jerry Tillery, DeAndre Walker, Jalen Ferguson, Austin Bryant, Christian Miller, Josh Allen. And that's if none of the 10 names that I mentioned earlier, just to run through those again: Nick Bosa, Cleveland Ferrell, Ed Oliver, Rashawn Gary, Quinnen Williams, Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, Raekwon Davis, Jesse Polite, and Derek Brown. If they've all gone, then forget about it. But of course, there is always a chance that one of those two drop, although I'm overrating them. But they're the cream for me. They're the top 10. And the names I've just talked about and run through are the guys that might be there for the Seahawks. There are options. There are plenty of options. There's no reason for the Seahawks not to be able to improve their defense in the draft. And I just think a double dip seems likely. A decent free agent signing or two, plus a high draft pick. They need to work on this defense. So in free agency, you've got players like Jadeveon Clowney, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Ziggy Ansah, who I suspect are going to get the big money. I'd love to see Clowney because he's just a game wrecker. He's a game changer. But assuming they franchise Frank Clark, I think it's really difficult to imagine they're going to pay huge money to 2 edge rushers, or they're going to be able to even afford that. So I can't see it. I'd love to see Clowney in Seattle playing opposite Frank Clark. That would be the most athletic pair of pass rushers I think the NFL has ever seen together. But it's perhaps unlikely. But who knows? Maybe they have got some cap room. It would be amazing to see Clowney and Clark together. I would love to see that. Just think it's going to be too expensive. So you look at some of the other options there. Clay Matthews is going to be a free agent. Could you get him on a moderate veteran deal? Is Anthony Barr going to find a lukewarm market after a bit of an indifferent couple of years in Minnesota? Terrell Suggs says that he wants to carry on playing, and it doesn't look as if Baltimore are going to offer him a contract. They're going to let him test the market. So do you fancy a year of Terrell Suggs? D Ford, not someone I've ever been particularly keen on. He's having a big year in Kansas City. You've got Brandon Graham at Philadelphia, who's out of contract. Dante Fowler's just gone to the Rams. He's out of contract. Cameron Wake at Miami's out of contract. Sheldon Richardson, let's include him. Minnesota, he's out of contract. You've got Grady Jarrett at Atlanta, who's out of contract. So there's plenty of free agent. There's a lot of names there. And they're not all going to get paid. So there may be some value. And here's the other thing to consider. In a great year for defensive linemen in the draft, is the market for these players going to come down? Is there going to be some value here? Let's hope so. There's at least a chance of that. Because are you going to pay Jadeveon Clowney, DeMarcus Lawrence, Ziggy Ansah big money? Maybe. Are the next lot of guys that would just run through going to get the big money when you could just go and draft someone at a fraction of the price? Perhaps not. So I think the Seahawks are going to have a chance to do a double dip here. High draft pick on the defensive line, free agent or two at good value, decent pickups that can really take this defense to the next level. And I would say a decent target for them would be another edge, or maybe 2, and someone who can really solidify the run defense in the interior. It'd be great to get an absolute beast like Derek Brown or Raekwon Davis to play inside in the first round. I think it's unlikely, as we talked about. Seattle has found run defenders at value in the past, and they may be able to again. That could present an opportunity to create a really fearsome pass rush using your money in free agency and the draft as well, and taking things a step forward in 2019. So I think it's all set up there. So what I would say to Seahawks fans is enjoy the rest of this season. Don't pin too many hopes up on Super Bowls and deep playoff runs. Take this year for what it is. It's a reset that's going better than expected. It's fun. Let's enjoy it. This team needs another offseason, though. And this offseason, with the free agent options and the defensive line options in the draft, is perfectly set up for the Seahawks to go one step further in 2019 and maybe become a proper contender again. Let's have some questions to finish. Then you've been sending these into the blog. Donovan asks, if the Seahawks have a successful offseason, define however you'd like, what's a realistic expectation for next season? I think a realistic expectation, if they have a successful offseason, is to be a contender in 2019. They've got a quarterback. They've got a running game. They've got a good offensive line. They've got a really good head coach. They've got some pieces on defense. They've just got to find some more. I think definitely if they have a good offseason, we can start to think about contending for the NFC West again, trying to overturn those 2 losses to the Rams, turn them into 2 wins, and being a really strong team that no one's going to want to play in the NFC. Pickering asks, any word on Will Disley's recovery, Jamarco Jones's, and any sense of Darbo's future? Thoughts on Rasheem Green? Which current Seahawks will be extended this coming off-season? Is Earl Thomas going to be a Seahawk or not? Okay, Will Disley and Jamarco Jones, very little information there. Wouldn't expect anything until the end of the season when Pete Carroll gets asked about these guys and how they're progressing. Obviously, Disley's is going to be an incredibly long-term recovery there. Jamarco Jones probably is feeling a bit better, and they probably just don't want to rush him back. There's no real need to at the moment. With Darbo, John Schneider spoke a few weeks ago, pre-game. He does an interview with Steve Rabel, and he mentioned that he still sees Darbo with a future with the team, that he could be David Moore next season, that there's still a chance for him there. So I think he's going to get every chance to compete and try and deliver on the potential he obviously saw on him. Thoughts on Rasheem Green? I mean, it's hard to say that you could be too disappointed with a third round. He is a third round rookie at the end of the day. I think I'm a little bit disappointed, though, that he's not been able to do more because he had such a great preseason. And you kind of felt like it had been wrong to expect he was going to have an amazing rookie year. The defensive linemen that the Seahawks have drafted have rarely had impacts as a rookie. But I think we could have expected a bit more. He's not really had much of an impact at all, has he? At least in terms of splash plays. And I think that's what we were kind of hoping to see a bit more of. So, maybe hopefully see a bit more towards the end of the year. But it's not been an amazing season for Rasheem Green. But he's still got time. He's young, so hopefully we'll see a bit more next year. Which current Seahawks will be extended this coming off season? I think the 2 offensive linemen will be. I think they almost have to re-sign one of KJ Wright or Michael Kendricks, depending on health with Wright and whether or not he's in prison with Michael Kendricks. That's kind of a weird thing to say. So I definitely think they have to try and keep one of those guys just to take the pressure off needing to find a starter at linebacker. Who else is a free agent? They might try and keep Brett Hundley. Don't think there's many others that are really out there. I think they'll try and re-sign Jaron Reed to a big contract extension in the offseason. I think they'll keep Frank Clark on the franchise tag. So I think he'll stay around, but on a tag for 1 more year. I think that's pretty much it for everybody, isn't it? And will Earl Thomas be a Seahawk or not? I think there's practically a 0% chance that he'll be a Seahawk next season. I think like 0.5% or something like that. I think he's going to move on. JJ says, what are your thoughts on Jaron Reed this year? Do you think his sack numbers are sustainable, or is it just a career year and he'll go back to 1 or 2 sacks a year? I'm not sure on that. Really not sure. Could see it dropping off again. Could see this being the start of a really blossoming career. It has taken defensive linemen a couple of years to get it in Seattle. They ask a lot more of their defensive linemen to be disciplined, to good gap control, and then ask them to have impact. And it feels like Jaron Reed's really sort of stepped up to the plate after a couple of years. He looks fantastic. I think he's become a really key player and a leader as well. So I think regardless of whether the sack numbers are sustainable or not, I still think he's such an important player. So I think he will sustain his form going forward. It's just whether or not the sack numbers are going to be there, but that remains to be seen. Hopefully there will be. Kenny says, if the Rams and Saints are locks and we assume the Seahawks are going to push for one of those wild cards, who else rounds out your NFC playoff teams? So I think it's between Dallas and Philly, really. I can't see the Colt McCoy Redskins lasting. So I think possibly Dallas have got the momentum at the moment. Philly are a bit inconsistent, scraped past the Giants, been poor for a while. You could see Philly making a late charge, potentially. And then if they did get into the playoffs, you probably wouldn't want to meet them. But I'm going to go for Dallas and Chicago as the 2 teams to win their divisions, to go with the Rams and the Saints. And then I think the wild cards, I think Seattle. And then it's really tough. It's really tough. I could see the Vikings. I could see the Panthers. I could see the Packers. I think I'm going to go with probably I can see the Panthers writing it a little bit, but I just think the Vikings are better on defense. So I think the Vikings will probably get there. Nick says, do you see any need to draft an offensive guard this year later on in the draft, or do you feel comfortable re-signing Fluker, Sweezy, and then rolling with Hunt, Posick, and Simmons as backups? I think just roll with what you've got. I think they've got a good thing going. Good starters, good depth. I don't see the need to draft an offensive lineman at all really this year. JD says, what do you think PCJS do with the tight end position gearing up for the 29th season? Do they hope Disley makes a full recovery and rob with Dixon, Disley, and Vanette, or draft one if they're able to gain additional picks? Extend Vanette or let him play out the final year of his contract? And what is your opinion on the TE draft class as well? So I think they'll just roll what they've got. I think that Vanette has done a good job this year. Dixon's still under contract. They seem to like him a lot. Disley has got the time to come back. He's got more time than Jimmy Graham did, so hopefully he's going to come back. They've kind of gone on with things without really needing sort of big names at tight end. So, George Fant's done a pretty good job as a blocker there. They've still got him. So I think they'll just roll with what they've got. Unless, of course, you just sort of get to the middle rounds or the day 3 or even undrafted free agency. That could be an area where they look at. And it's just a guy they really like, in the same way that they really like Will Disley. Then I can see them taking someone. I think that the tight end class, I would best describe it as I don't think there's going to be many early round guys. Probably just the guy at Stanford is going to go there. But then after that, I think there could be some decent depth in the middle rounds. I'm not as enamored by it as everybody else, though. And I think with tight ends, you kind of have to see how they test before you make a real firm judgment on how good it is, because athleticism is so important for the position these days. And I like to sort of see a bit of that. Unless someone is billed as an absolutely fantastic blocking tight end like Will Disley is, then you go and have a look at him and you sort of make a judgment there. But otherwise, you kind of want to see how they test first before you judge them. So look forward to the combine there with that. But I'm not crazy about this tight end class. And I think that's pretty much it for the questions. I'll just have another look, see if any new ones have come in here. Couple more then. This one says, in regards to a run-stuffing defensive tackle, I've got a couple of thoughts on that. Now it has not worked this year. John Schneider has had success in finding free agent run stuffing DTs. I think one of the main issues is at linebacker. You've got Bobby Wagner, and then that's about it. KJ Wright has been missing in action all year. Michael Kendrick seemed to play well, but correct me if I'm wrong. The run defense was not this bad when Kendricks was playing. Kendricks will be back against the Vikings. I'll be really interested to see how the run defense performs with Kendricks back in the fold. That's from RW3. Yeah, I think the run defense has suffered a little bit with the lack of Kendricks or KJ Wright. I think Bobby Wagner's suffered a little bit as well. You've noticed he's not got a sack, he's not got an interception. I don't think he's got sort of like that huge play in any of the games so far, and I think he misses having Sheldon Richardson in front of him or some of the other defensive linemen they've had in the past. And I think another one of the reasons why I think they have to target defensive linemen in the offseason and go big there is because I think they have to make life a bit easier for Bobby Wagner. He's still having a great year, but I think he can be even better if they have those sort of better defensive linemen playing in front of him as well. Trevor says, Rob, the Hawks have a ton of free agents this offseason. Who would you prioritize to re-sign? And also, would you try to extend early? Well, I kind of answered that earlier, but I think Jerron Reed is a player that would try and extend early. And who would I prioritize? Frank Clark, probably the franchise tag, and then Sweezy and Fluke would be the two guys that I would prioritize there. And that's about it. So I think we're pretty much there with the questions. So thank you for sending those in, and thank you for listening as well. Really appreciate it. Stick with Seahawks Draft Blog. We're going to have loads of stuff. I'm sure we'll have more podcasts soon and stuff like that, and I'll do a few more of these. Let me know what you think of the Google Hangouts as well. You know, people have said they like them in the past. Do you still like this format? Do you want to hear guests rather than just me talking? You know, let me know what you think about it. We're going to have a lot of draft content coming up in the new year too, as usual. And we'll make things interesting towards the end of the NFL season as well, and the bowl season too. So keep sticking with Seahawks Draft Blog. Great community there. Love all of you guys in the comments section and the way that you keep it cordial and engage with each other. It's unique to the internet. So thank you to that. Thank you to all the Patreons for your support. It certainly means a lot to me. And I suppose we'll leave with this. Here's to a Seahawks win. Hopefully, fingers crossed, against the 49ers this weekend. Take care.